Hi, this is Jay Richards. We're here at COSM 2021, the conference in Bellevue, Washington, with Discovery Institute and George Gilder. And I am joined by my friend and Discovery Institute colleague, Gale Pooley. Gale, good to see you.
Great to be here, Jay.
So you just sort of ended here the first day here talking about the stuff you do so well, talking about abundance. Give us a sort of brief summary of what you said in the session.
Yeah, so what I try to describe is just when we look at the time prices of things, and a time price is really just the time it requires you to earn the money to buy something. Mm-hmm. When we use that approach to look at what prices have done, you know, from a perspective the last 40, 50, 100 years ago, what we're seeing is all of this abundance occur, where it takes us less and less time to earn the money to buy more and more of goods and services, from basic commodities to, you know, we think about iPhones and the high-tech stuff, but we just see it everywhere, this abundance that's emerging.
So this is essentially, the time price is a way of measuring abundance. And instead of talking about an adjusted price or prices adjusted for inflation, it's the amount of time it takes to buy a particular thing for the average worker.
Right. How much time do you have to work to earn the money to buy a gallon of milk?
Okay.
And then you compare that over time. Is you having to spend more time or less time? And if you look at the rate of change in that time price, that's really what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm. And that, I assume, that doesn't even take account of the fact that the product itself might improve, right?
Right. So you take these basic commodities that aren't changing, and it's like, we know that these, you know, like a Ford F-150, that changes over time. It's not the same car as it was in 1980.
That's right.
But if you take basic commodities, bushel of wheat, kind of a bushel of wheat. And so we see that this abundance is actually showing up, this innovation, really, this additional knowledge. And what we like to think about is George has described this idea that wealth is knowledge, growth is learning, and money is time. Well, how do you measure the growth in knowledge?
Yeah.
You can measure it with time.
Okay.
So when things get cheaper for you, it means that there's more knowledge in an economy. That's why they become less and less time expensive for you.
Because time and attention, those are fixed scarcities, right? We're never going to get more minutes in a day.
Yeah, and Tony Stark, you remember he says, his dad says something like, no matter how much money you have, you can never buy a second more of time. He's recognizing that time is fixed, but it's also continuous.
That's right.
Everybody gets 24 hours a day.
That's right. And so if you could do more with less time, that's the idea.
Right.
So that's a way of measuring abundance. It's an incredibly fruitful idea. And I know when you first did it, you were focusing, as you said, on, was it 50 commodities? 50 basic commodities, which I guess, did you pick those largely because, first of all, they're common to everyone, but also because it's a kind of a standard measure. As you said, a bushel of wheat doesn't change that much.
So we actually, our initial inspiration was this bet that Julian Simon and Paul Ehrlich had, and it was 5 metals.
Yes.
And from 1980 to 1990, and we said, well, would he win that bet today? And one of the criticisms of that bet was it was only these 5 things. So we expanded it from 5 to 50. So we included items from energy, from food, from these materials, like what's it cost to get a 2x4? Yeah. What's it cost to get, 100 pounds of cotton? And then we also looked at minerals and these metals that were included. And we go back to 1980, the date that they started. So we got this 40-year history of 50 items. So our data set gets much larger. The World Bank also tracks all of these prices. So you got this good, solid source of data.
I see.
So we can go to the World Bank, get all of the prices, look at what wages are, and take the money price, divide it by the wage, and that's how much time it takes.
Well, but you also talked a good bit about the high-tech stuff. So you talked about the iPhone and Mac Classic and things. So what's the point there? Because obviously that's not a commodity, these complex or high-tech
so those we're really seeing these big change in all this new knowledge is really changing the product. And we're seeing this huge abundance occur there. And that's part of this idea of that George talks about, learning curves. And the reason that we're able to actually increase make these products, and like the iPhone, the price doesn't seem like it goes down, but you get twice as much.
Oh, heck yeah.
You're getting twice as much, so the effective price is going down. At the same time, everybody's hourly wages growing up. So what's it cost you to buy an iPhone today? Even though it's 10 times better iPhone than it was in 2007, it actually takes you less time to buy it.
Yeah. So, there's no doubt that the current iPhone is significantly better at the sorts of things that it can do. But you also had this analysis, because we tend to think of these high-tech products that have made certain men fabulously wealthy, people like Steve Wozniak and the late Steve Jobs, and we focus on that part of the equation, like, oh, that guy became a billionaire. But you do this analysis of the amount of value created for the company and then for customers. So what's going on?
So I actually didn't do the analysis. I actually, Nobel Prize winning economist William Nordhaus wrote this paper, and he was talking about Schumpetering profits.
Yes.
And the economist talked about innovation. He said, when this innovation happens, who benefits? Mm-hmm. And so Nordhaus tried to quantify who gets the benefit.
Okay.
And he came up with a number of producers, the actual innovating entrepreneurs, keep about 2.2% of that value.
Wow.
So the customers are getting 97.8% of the value.
Yeah.
So it's like a pie that's got 44 slices, and the guy makes the pie, and he gives he keeps one slice and he gives all that value away.
And he created a pie that grew a whole lot.
Right. And the customer's like, they didn't take any of the risks.
Yeah.
They didn't.
It's amazing the way you sort of analyze this, because you initially think that. I think, well, how do we calculate this? But one way of calculating it, you said, is to ask somebody how much they would need to be paid. For instance, never to have another iPhone or a smartphone. Or for me, never to be able to do search on the internet when you're doing research.
Yeah.
That would actually be a lot of money.
What would I have to pay you to give up that? So,
that's right.
In economics, we're always looking at revealed preferences.
Yes.
Like, how much would you give for this? And people say, well, I'll give you $20 for the pizza. Mm-hmm. And it's, well, somebody else will give you $16. So we're trying to figure that out. That's one way to figure out the difference between the price and what someone values it as, to say, well, you actually, when you paid $20, when you paid $15 for the pizza, but you thought it was worth $20, you got like this $5 worth of profit, right?
Yeah.
Well, one way you can do that is, instead of asking people what they would pay for it, is ask them what you would have to pay them to give it up.
Okay.
And that's, I think, a better approach to take when you're talking about these devices that people.
That makes sense.
People buy, they pay $1,000 for it. Well, what was it worth to you? And they say, well, I paid $1,000 for it. I know that's what you paid for it, but what's it really worth to you? And the larger question is, what would I have to pay you to not use it?
That's right.
And the reason that iPhones are so cheap is because we got a competitive market.
Absolutely.
Right? It's competition that makes it cheap, not
Thank goodness for those Android phones, or we might be in trouble.
And I think also Apple, they can move along with these. We have these really large fixed costs to create these products, and then the marginal cost is really low.
Right.
So it's like, what do we have to do to be able to cover these fixed costs? So when you have a population of 1,000 people,
oh gosh,
that's a lot different than when you have a population of 1 million or 1 billion people.
That's right.
So a lot of these products really complicated to make, but the market is so big that you can become profitable.
Yeah, you can spread those fixed costs out over 10 million products.
Yeah, it's amazing that I can get a pill that costs me $2 that cost $1 billion to make.
That's right.
And I get it for $2.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
I know.
Because there's so many people on the planet.
Yeah. Well, you really emphasized at the end of your talk, I would say, not a kind of naive optimism, but hope. And of course, that's a sort of theme of COSM 2021 is, are we headed toward doom, or are we headed toward prosperity and abundance? And you had, I think, a really interesting perspective. And we were talking about, okay, what is the source of your hope in the future? Is it technology? Is it laws? Is it people? What is it?
One, I think, as you look at this perspective, and going back to when we first did this analysis, we expected to find some of those 50 items. Mm-hmm. We expected to find some of those had gotten more expensive.
Sure.
We thought, well, one of these items on this list of 50 is more expensive today than it was in 1980. Not a single one of them had gotten more expensive. So it was like, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on the average, they dropped by 75%. Uranium had dropped like 89%.
Totally counterintuitive, because there are more people. Right? So this is why when people first hear this, they think, how could this possibly be?
Yeah, how could that be?
Yeah.
And then as you go through the logic of what does it take for these innovations to occur, well, they begin with human beings. It's human beings that are free to learn.
Right.
So if you add more human beings and you add more freedom, then you should get more knowledge.
Yeah.
And that knowledge shows up in lower time prices.
Well, and you said more human beings and more freedom. Freedom in this kind of rich sense of the American founding, not just people doing whatever they want, of course, but ordered free people in a rule of law and property rights and ability to title property and patent. So it's the person who's an innovator, but a person in different social settings is going to be capable of more or less productive.
This idea of
work.
a culture that's this kind of solid. Do you have a foundation culture that doesn't change, doesn't cause static and noise, that gives you these basic fundamental. You have property rights. Do you have a court system where you can resolve disputes? Can you exchange things? Are these contracts enforceable? So if you can create that in your culture, then these other things.
The low entropy carrier, to speak in as George would speak in communications theory. That's the low entropy carrier, and then you get the high entropy. Entrepreneurship and creativity.
Entrepreneurs need government. They need government to perform these functions that allow them to be creative. That's also an important takeaway too, I think, is you can't go into a situation that's anarchy, chaos, and expect for entrepreneurship to thrive.
So you're on the optimist side, but it's not a techno-utopianism. It's an optimism because of your belief in the human capacities as creatures made in the image of God to create.
Yeah, exactly. And this creative ability that, I think people are happiest when they can do two things, that they can create and they can choose. If you're free to create, pursue your ideas, and you're free to make the choice about what you want to do, people can do these astonishing things. And we don't know who it is either. We don't know, the Steve Jobs thing is interesting because it's like there's how many Steve Jobs are in China or India or in Syria today?
We don't know.
We don't know. We don't know what their ideas are, but we do know that they're there. We do know that they're there.
Well, that's a hopeful thought. Thanks, Gale. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Jay.
This is Jay Richards. Thanks for joining us. We are at COSM 2021.